Today, by popular demand, we are going to jump in the procedure that I use whenever I tune a vehicle. I'm going to go through kind of the steps, the basic steps that I use to prepare everything and what I do as I move through these steps to tune a vehicle to what I think is properly. So stick around. Hey everybody, welcome back to the garage, and by request from a lot of you viewers out there, I've been asked what are the steps that I go through whenever I approach a tune job, kind of what are the order of operations. But before I get into that, I want to say if you find this video or any of my other videos useful, please make sure and hit the thumbs up button out there. That gets me exposure, gets it out in front of other people, helps grow the community around tuning, gets those good questions out there. That being said, if you have not already, make sure and subscribe. There's a lot of cool stuff coming out. We're going to start doing the live show more often. I'm hoping to make that a weekly ordeal, so you don't want to miss out on that. And the best way to keep up is to hit the bell after subscribing. That way you get those notifications. But that being said, let's dive into the tuning steps as done here at the garage. And as I said in the intro, we are talking about tuning vehicles again, but this is kind of a quick tip. We're not actually doing any tuning today. We're not getting into necessarily the steps of doing a certain type of tuning. We are talking about tuning as a whole in general, the approach that I take whenever it comes to tuning a new car. And there's a couple points or a couple tips that I want to throw out there for you guys that will save you a lot of heartache down the road and will make your job a lot easier whenever it comes to tuning. And the first and most important one, I can't stress this enough, make sure your vehicle is in good running condition. That means, you know, if you haven't, check the air filter, check the spark plugs. If you have a check engine light, figure out what it is, fix it. Get everything as far as the way the vehicle runs working properly, because if not, whenever you go to tune, those things will just compound and cause you issues. You are not going to fix those problems through tuning. If you have a problem beforehand, you are going to consistently have a problem afterwards, and if anything, you are going to create a plethora of other problems. So make sure all of your basics are out of the way, everything is working right, and that will save you a lot of heartache down the road. Now, my second guideline or step is, it kind of depends on the situation, but this is the way I like to approach it, and this is one of those things, if possible, I highly suggest taking your modifications in steps. So, modification, tune, modification, tune. Now, some situations aren't going to allow for that, and this isn't as critical on the Gen 3s, but on the Gen 4s and Gen 5s where you get into torque modeling and things like that, it can become an issue. To give you a prime example, I was working with somebody the other day, had a 6.2 liter that had been stroked out to 6.9 liters, had a cam put in it, had new injectors put on it, had a blower put on it, did all this stuff, and then just had a tune file for the original 6.2 liter and was having an issue getting things dialed in. That's because they changed the dynamics so much that there's not an easy starting point, and much like we always try to tune to approach normal tuning, we try to bite these things off in small little pieces and work our way out to the bigger picture of the tune. But sometimes whenever you do a lot of modifications all at once like that, it can cause issues. That's a prime example because, as I said, there was so much going on the dynamics of the engine, the way that the engine actually inhales air all of a sudden, that almost every single map in that ECU was invalidated. And so there's not a lot to build off of. If you have the ability to build up step by step by step, it will save you a lot of heartache. So you can go out there and you can punch a stroker kit on something, and you can tune for that stroker kit and get that ballparked in and get it dialed in, and then add injectors, get that dialed in, then add the blower, get that dialed in, things like that. But whenever you do 5 or 6 big dynamic changing mods like that all at once, you're going to give yourself a heartache. Once again, I understand sometimes there's not a whole lot that we can do about that. Sometimes whenever we have catastrophic engine failure or something, we go back to the drawing board, completely built from the ground up, but we're still using the original control system. If you're on a Gen 3, you have a lot less of these problems to deal with, but if you're on a Gen 4, just be prepared. Your tuning is going to take a significantly longer time to accomplish. There's nothing you can do about that. You have so many small parts that you have to address that it is going to, I would say, for every part that you add on top of it on a Gen 4 or Gen 5, you need to multiply the amount of tuning time by double what it was going to take. So if it was going to take you 2 hours for the first part, it's going to take you 4 hours for the second part, 8 hours for the next part, 16 hours for the next part. So instead of taking 2 hours, 2 hours, 2 hours, 2 hours and having 8 hours total, you're looking at 40 to 50 hours of tuning because of all these small adjustments you're going to have to make to get things dialed in. That's a big one. The next one really dives into what do we need to do next. We need to save files. Save files every step of the way. Every time you make a change, save a new file. Document on that file name what the change was, put the date on there, and if necessary, if you're doing a lot in one day, put the time on there or a revision number. This gives us something that we can go back to and reference. It's good to have a very start point reference, the as found from the very beginning of the project, and then do a as found every single day that you might be tuning on it, and then save multiple change files underneath that. Use folders to your advantage, keep everything organized as best as possible, but save multiple files. You will thank me down the road if you do that. After that, you want to go in and you want to prepare your tune for the initial tuning steps. And that means doing small things like adjusting your fuel map. If you are doing something that could possibly put you in a dangerously lean situation, such as going from normally aspirated to forced induction, you need to adjust the fuel map specifically for the different systems. If you're tuning maps first, you may need to bump your hertz up on your map scale or your map curve. If you're doing volumetric efficiency, you need to dial fuel up in the volumetric efficiency tables. And you need to do it appropriate to the type of blower that you're running. If you're running a turbocharger or a Sentry supercharger, you only need to focus on the higher RPMs where you start to make boost. If you put a Roots on there, that kind of blower starts making boost right off the bat. You'll need to really kind of fatten up the fuel tables across the whole threshold. Do that. Then on top of it, let's pull some timing out. Not a whole lot, but maybe 4 degrees out of the base table. That way we are not having to fight any kind of pre-detonation that might be there, or we might have been on the cusp of experiencing while we try to get our fuel tuning in. There's not much worse that we can have than detonation while trying to do fuel tuning. So that being said, after you do that, whenever you start doing your initial logs, make sure you keep an eye on your fuel trims. First and foremost, make sure that we're not having any lean spots. Lean spots will destroy a motor quicker than anything else. So that is our focus. Let's make a initial tune that is safe, aka kind of pig rich, and then we will tune out of the richness back towards stoic from there. After that, we want to go ahead and determine what style of fuel tuning we want to do first. I personally like to do mass airflow sensors first. They're a little bit easier, a little bit quicker to do, and the cool thing about it is you can force it over to mass airflow sensor once you've got that thing dialed in, and you can drive the vehicle. So if you, for some reason, need to get from point A to point B, you ran out of time or something like that, focus on the mass airflow sensor first. You can get that thing dialed in real quick. And as long as you have that thing where it will not go into dynamic airflow or speed density, you should be fairly safe. You might run into some issues on forced induction platforms where you max out the mass airflow sensor. Just take note of that, and if possible, dial the boost back or just stay off the gas pedal until you have a chance to fix those situations. After that, we would move into the speed density tuning where we disable the mass airflow sensor and focus on just doing speed density tuning. Make sure you set aside enough time to properly go through and do all of the logs that you need to. This is one of the longer processes, if not the longest process in tuning, is getting speed density dialed in. Once we kind of have the air maps dialed in, if need be, we can go back and start making adjustments to the idle map. If you have to, even before you do map or speed density, you can start working on the idle parameters if you can't get the thing running from the get-go. So based on which platform you are, there are a couple quick and easy things that you can do to get the thing up and running, which will then allow you to start doing airflow tuning. But if you can get it running without having to adjust the idle first, I would focus on getting our math curve dialed in and possibly our speed density. But these 3 items are kind of rotational based on the needs of the vehicle that you're tuning. So just keep that in mind. Then after that, we're going to look at doing our timing adjustments. We're going to go in, start looking at our timing, advancing it, looking for that spark knock, or if we have access to a dyno, we're looking for that torque curve to max out or the horsepower to max out, and that gives us an idea of where we need to stop advancing timing. Also make sure and keep an eye on spark knock at this point in time, because that is when you're going to see it. Is whenever you start advancing the timing far enough, you're going to get pre-detonation, which is going to cause pinging or not. So that's the big thing, but you have to make sure and have all of your fueling dialed in before you can do your timing. Next, if you are on a torque-based system, we move into the torque tables and the driver demand tables. Make sure that you are adjusting these to work alongside with the vehicle that you are doing, your mods that you're doing. And what I mean by that is if you're doing an intake and a catback, don't put more than 15% onto the tables. You're not getting 100 horsepower out of an intake and a catback. Be realistic with these values, because if not, they will cause issues with other systems in the car. That being said, after you do these, keep an eye on your fueling and things like that. Make sure everything looks copacetic after you've made these torque adjustments. Some things can still get a little bit out of whack, but ideally, you should be pretty dialed in. There might be a few new cells that you hit on speed density because beforehand, before you adjusted the torque, you were limiting things such as timing and your throttle body. Now that you've adjusted the torque, there's a good chance that your throttle body may actually come open a little bit more. You may run a little bit more timing, and it will change your volumetric efficiency tables. So just keep an eye out there. Hopefully your MAF sensor is already dialed in. That thing will catch it all the way through though. But that's one thing to keep in mind as we dial in our torque tables. Next, we're going to go ahead and take a look at the torque management stuff underneath the engine parameters. There's not a lot here that we need to mess with if we have our torque model set up right, but it doesn't hurt to go over those. Make sure that there's nothing there that we want to adjust. After that, we're going to dive into the transmission. If you're on a manual transmission, about the only thing that you're going to want to do is disable CAGs. It's probably been done already. That's the first thing that most people do whenever they get their tuner, but if you have an automatic transmission, we might want to go in, bump up some pressures, change some shift speeds, things like that. Once again, we might look at the torque management on the transmission side of it, adjust how it pulls timing out during shifts, etc. And then last but not least, we're going to look at any of the ancillary stuff that we may need to do. In certain situations, we might have to disable some engine checks, especially around pressures on naturally or forced induction cars. Just might want to adjust whenever the fans kick on, just some small extra things that could be situational to each and every video. And that's pretty much the process that I go through. A lot of that is rinse and repeat. It's kind of condensed down just for this, but it gives you an idea of how I step through the approach that I go into each tune with. So that sums up kind of my steps through going through tuning. Hopefully it gives you an idea of my thought process whenever I come to a vehicle that requires tuning, and sheds a little light on the steps that I personally go through in the process. If you find this video helpful, do me a favor, hit the thumbs up out there. That way so other people get exposure to these videos. And if you haven't already, make sure and subscribe. There's videos coming out every other day or so on different topics, quick videos like this, longer in-depth videos. That being said, make sure you check out the tuning link down below to the long playlist that goes into specifics on different platforms. I am continually adding to that with new how-tos, tutorials, things like that. Also, if you're interested in it, check out the Patreon. I appreciate everybody who's already signed up. Your support makes all the difference in the world. It's a great way to interact with me. It's a great way to get advice on specific tuning issues, things like that, and get tune reviews. So make sure and check that out down in the link below. Other than that, I want to thank all the new subscribers. We're getting ready to break 3,000. Hopefully here in the next couple days it'll be done. We're just growing as fast as can be humanly possible. I thank all of you guys for sharing this stuff, and I thank all of you guys for tuning in. We're going to be having a live stream here on this Thursday. I'm hoping to make this a weekly thing, so keep your eyes peeled for that. And as always, I want to say thanks for stopping by the garage.